Hi everyone, DM Pie Guy here. So I wanted to make this video about modules, how I prep them, how to run them, and mainly how to approach them as a new DM. Because I see a lot of new DMs struggling with running modules. A lot of people will advise you to just run homebrew for your first time out on DMing. I think that's a fine idea, but running a module has its charm too. And once you develop a little bit of module literacy, I think that it could be a very powerful tool in helping you get your games faster, because a lot of the work is done for you if you can find a good one. So, the first thing to realize is that there are a couple type of modules. I'm going to put them into two categories. I wanted to originally put them into three of good, bad, and needs a little bit of work, but I just found that that's a little bit too over-reductive. So the two types that I'll put into the broad category of is adventures that tell you exactly how they want to be played. Some examples of this are Lost Mines of Phandelver, which I have here in front of us. I'm going to go through this one a little bit more in detail as a case study. And then Descent into Avernus are both modules that very much tell you how things should go. And then you have ones that give you very little direction, sometimes to an infuriating extent even. Examples of those would be Curse of Strahd and the other one I'm going to do a case study on here, which is the Hunt for the Thessal Hydra. So there are pros and cons to each of these. So the directed experience is going to be easier for you to prep. You're going to be more sure of yourself going into it because you have a lot of details about everything. You're going to know, so the characters are going to start at this location, traveling on the road with this dwarf who has this personality, and it'll tell you how to play him and all that sort of stuff. It'll tell you how to run your goblins. It'll tell you what's going to happen. And then it's going to tell you you're eventually going to come here to this Cragmaw hideout, the first dungeon. And it'll give you a lot of events that kind of go on in here. And if this happens, then do that type thing. Curse of Strahd is very much an opposite of that. It will give you kind of just this big... where's the map? Yeah. It'll just give you this big map, and then it'll tell you what's in the rooms, and you kind of just got to go at it figuring it out for yourself for the most part. The beauty of that, though, is that you have the ability to make up kind of whatever you want and put it into this as long as it fits within the space. You don't really have so much of that in here. Particularly in Lost Mines of Phandelver, you kind of don't need to. Like, it's a very, very good experience out of the box. With Descent into Avernus that I have up here, this is one that I have a bone to pick with because it's too rigid. It gives you too much structure. So, this Hunt for the Thessal Hydra is a module that I've played through twice now. Both of the experiences went very differently, and both of the times I've come to the conclusion that the module is written poorly. It's not the DM's fault for running it badly, because it gives you gems of advice such as this. It gives you 4 NPCs here that are bullet points. This merchant, he offers you an apple. He says that the local apples tasted better before the Thessal Hydra arrived, and that's why he's sure the monster's lair is in the apple orchard to the north. Alright, thanks Mr. Merchant. I know actually nothing about him, so if any of my players ask me anything about this merchant, I have to make it all up. As a new DM, that's not a territory that you want to be in because there's a very high likelihood that if your player says, how many kids you got? You might be like, 2, and then they're going to kind of take that for a ride where you don't want to get going. But the problem with these 4 bullet points is it's like, great, they're throwaway NPCs. It literally tells you, when the players start getting bored with role-playing encounters, it's time for them to find the Trog Cave. So, the above is complete throwaway text. Thank you, Hunt for Thessal Hydra. Thank you. So, All of that aside, basically what you need to know is if you're running a module like this where it gives you very little, like if you have an NPC where all that they have is just they're a merchant who offers an apple, and then they have a piece of plot information, you might need to add more. That's kind of where it comes down to. So as you run modules, you're going to develop a skill that I call module literacy, which is basically you identify the holes in the module or places where you kind of don't like where it's going. So one module that I'm going to do a quick case study on here that people really don't like, a lot of times I've found, is Death House. I think that Death House is an amazing dungeon. It's really difficult if you want it to be. It has a whole lot of flavor. It's got a little story that it runs through. It has a lot of the makings of like a really great starter dungeon. But you need to have a little bit of that module literacy to know where the sticking points are going to be. So, a lot of the sticking points of this come from the encounters in the basement. So, in the encounters in the basement, there's a couple that are just pretty difficult, or they kind of feel forced. So if we take a look at this, these X's here, if you step on space 29 or like anywhere in that hallway, ghouls just pop up. If you go into this bedroom here, you touch the chest, ghouls pop out of the wall. The module doesn't really tell you how to deal with some of those things. It'll kind of just say like, when this happens, do this. But your players are going to want to know more information. They're going to say like, oh, do I see... I tap on the walls, and then it's up to you, the DM, to realize, oh, that's a hollow wall. So you hear dunk, 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 and then the player's going to be like, aha, and then what do you do with that? So you need to have a little bit of that improvisation skill that you might not have built up those muscles yet if you're brand new to running modules. So just know, one of the main takeaways, the module is the template. It is not exactly what you're going to run, unless you really want to run it that way. But I think that almost everyone who runs modules well changes just a little bit to a lot. So, how do I prep modules? Well, I will, let's take Curse of Strahd here. So, I will read the introduction here, because these introductions are usually quite short. So you have like the background, that actually does not matter a ton. You have this running the adventure, that is pretty helpful for you for like getting your tone and some of the general overviews of what this game's going to be like. The adventure structure, that's going to give you a flow path. Descendant and Avernus does this really well. It gives you an actual flowchart of this is where the adventure is going to go. It's a very linear adventure though, so it is conducive to that type of thing. That's why I thought originally that this module was going to be a really good beginner module. I don't know if you can hear the dog outside, but forgive him. Anyways, this is not a good beginner module. I'll show you one of the pitfalls that I believe happens in this module. So, your very first adventure hook is you're told to meet with this Captain Zoj. Captain Zoj. I think they have a pronunciation guide, but I don't know exactly how to say his name. So this guy, he's not a good dude. He is he's one step above a bandit, we might say. But he has authority. So they specifically tell you here that he's allowed to draft adventures in times of emergency. He won't accept any refusal, and that he can execute players on the spot for refusing to help. That, to me, screams this is going to go badly because I'm going to have a player that refuses and then get executed. And you might say, that's fine. And you're right, it wouldn't be the end of the world because it's literally just the beginning of an adventure. You say, oh, you come back, new character, whatever. But it's also not really ideal, you know? You're a beginning DM, that could set the tone of the night poorly for you. And if you come into a session tilted, I guarantee you, I've experienced it, things don't go good for the rest of the night. So I'll read all of these, all this little beginning information. And then one of the things to really pay attention to here is the level recommendations. They are not kidding about most of these recommendations in Wizards of the Coast modules. You can do them at different levels, but it's going to be more work on yourself. Just be aware of that. So I do that, and then I'll go to the chapter that I'm wanting to run. So for instance, let's say I'm going to run Village of Barovia. So then what I will do is I will read through this chapter. They're not incredibly long. It's going to be like 10-ish pages for most of these books. Sometimes it's a little bit longer. Like if we look at Descent into Avernus again, this one is really long because it basically only has 4 chapters, if we're being serious. Or maybe it was 5 chapters. But anyways, this one, really, really long. I just prepare what I'm going to need. So in this one, I know because I've read it before, just the very beginning, that I'm only going to need for the first 3 sessions, probably up to the Dungeon of the Dead 3 here. So that's all that I'm going to prepare for the first 3 sessions. I'm not going to prepare the entire book. I'm not going to read it cover to cover. Everyone says you should read the module cover to cover. I will tell you that's not true. Just read enough to where you have context on what you're going to run. Village of Barovia is one where you might have to read a little bit more than just this chapter, because you will come to certain spots where it will say, go look at this. Yeah, so this character provides information if they go see Madame Ava, which is over here. So then I'll have to go and read about Madame Ava, because she's not in this chapter. Once again, Descent into Avernus, it's entirely self-contained, so it doesn't really have too much of that hyperlinking. Also, this is on D&D Beyond, so you're not going to have hyperlinks in just the published hardback cover Curse of Strahd, which will make this a lot more infuriating if you have to flip, instead of just me, I just open it up in a new tab. So that's what I'll do. I'll read through all of this, all the areas, and then I'll identify basically everything that I find really important. So I'll identify Irina is really important because they give me almost as much information on role-playing her as they give me on like an entire area here. So I should probably put a little bit of effort into giving her a unique personality. Same with all of these named NPCs. Like, you generally take any named NPC and you want to give them a little bit of attention on how you're supposed to play them. Sometimes they're going to give you a little bit more or less, depending on how important the module views them. That's something that you need to decide too, because there's going to be times where this Father Donovich guy is really just supposed to be like a plot thread where he'll throw out a hook and then the players are like, cool, we'll go do that for you, Father Donovich. And then you're going to have a player that wants Father Donovich to, you know, ordain them as a minister or something, and he's going to be an essential character for the rest of the module. Don't know why that happens, but it always does without fail, where you're going to need more than you get sometimes. Just be aware of that. But so once you've identified these key points, you'll also want to look for then encounters. And encounters in particular that you think could be problematic. So, one of the ones that I didn't identify on my first time around, but hindsight being 20/20, I can tell you that fighting Morgantha at level 3 whenever you come out, they could do it, but I didn't expect them to. Also, it would be a pretty hard fight. So yeah, you're gonna want to look for encounters like that where you're like, ooh, this could be really difficult, and my players are probably going to approach it in this specific way. Because you'll know your group better than the module knows you. So if you need to tune encounters up or down, that is going to be on you. Alright, that's pretty much all that I've got for this video. My next one, I want to do some talk on encounter balancing, because I feel like that's a lot of the advice that I have for running these, is kind of tuning encounters essentially on the fly, or like a little bit in the prep work beforehand. So I'll probably come back with a whole video on how I do that, because it's really more of an art than a science, but there are a few things that I've found are pretty consistent. Alright, thanks for bearing with me here, guys, and I'll see you next time.